It was a bright, sunny Saturday morning in the quiet suburbs, where life usually felt safe and predictable. 8-year-old Lily had set up her lemonade stand at the corner of her street, a makeshift table with a hand-painted sign reading "Fresh Lemonade, $1." The little girl, with her golden curls and dimpled smile, radiated excitement as she poured lemonade into plastic cups for neighbors and passers-by. It was her first business venture, an idea born from her dream of saving up for a new bicycle. Every smile she got in return for her lemonade made her beam with pride, her joy as pure as the bright yellow sunflowers decorating her stand. Unbeknownst to Lily, trouble was approaching. A beat-up truck rumbled down the street, the exhaust sputtering like it didn't belong in the serene neighborhood. 3 men sat inside, their loud voices cutting through the peaceful air. They weren't just ordinary passers-by. They carried an air of menace, their faces marked with tattoos and their eyes sharp with mischief. As the truck slowed to a stop near Lily's stand, the laughter from inside turned sinister. Lily glanced at them nervously but smiled as she always did, holding out a cup of lemonade. "Would you like some lemonade?" she asked, her voice soft and innocent. The men stepped out of the truck, towering over her tiny frame. One of them, wearing a leather jacket and chewing gum loudly, smirked. Well, what do we have here? A little entrepreneur, huh?" Lily nodded, unaware of the tension in the air. "It's really good. Only $1. Another man chuckled, reaching for the jar where she kept her earnings. $1. You've made quite a bit already. Maybe we should take a taste. For free." Before Lily could respond, the man tipped the jar over, spilling her hard-earned coins onto the ground. The sound of metal clinking against the pavement echoed louder than her small gasp of shock. "Hey, that's my money," Lily protested, her voice trembling. The men laughed, one of them grabbing the pitcher of lemonade and deliberately knocking it over. The bright yellow liquid pooled around the stand, soaking her hand-painted sign. They pushed the table over, the cups scattering onto the street. Lily's lip quivered, but she stood her ground, trying to hold back tears. "Why are you doing this? I didn't do anything to you." "Life's tough, kid," the man in the leather jacket sneered. "Better get used to it." As they started to walk away, leaving the mess behind, something shifted in the atmosphere. The rumble of another vehicle filled the street, this time a sleek black SUV pulling into the driveway just a few houses down. Lily's heart leaped with a mixture of relief and dread. Her dad was home. Jake, her father, had only returned from deployment a week ago. A decorated Navy SEAL, his reputation for precision, discipline, and unshakable composure preceded him. But to Lily, he was just Dad, the man who made her pancakes shaped like animals and told her bedtime stories about bravery and kindness. As Jake stepped out of the car, his sharp eyes immediately took in the scene. The overturned lemonade stand, the spilled coins, the frightened look on his daughter's face. And then he saw the men. The air grew still, charged with an unspoken tension. Jake's jaw tightened, and his hands, which had seen countless missions and handled the toughest situations, balled into fists. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of a storm about to break. "Lily," he said, his tone measured, "what happened here?" Lily ran to him, tears finally spilling over. "Daddy, they ruined everything. They took my money and broke my stand." Jake knelt down, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart. I got this." Standing to his full height, Jake turned toward the men, who had stopped in their tracks, realizing they were no longer dealing with a defenseless child. One of them scoffed, trying to maintain his bravado. "Who's this?" "Daddy's here to save the day." Jake didn't respond right away. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his piercing gaze locked onto them. The men shifted uncomfortably, sensing they'd underestimated him. The quiet street seemed to hold its breath as Jake's voice broke the silence. "You messed with the wrong family." The 3 men exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence faltering as Jake moved closer. He didn't need to shout or threaten. There was something in the way he carried himself, an unshakable calm, that made it clear he was not someone to provoke. The leader of the group, the man in the leather jacket, forced a grin, trying to mask his nerves. "Look, we didn't mean any harm, just having a little fun," he said, holding up his hands as if to show innocence. Jake didn't waver, his eyes scanning each of them as if memorizing their faces. He'd learned to read people in an instant, a skill that had saved his life more than once. These men were trouble, no doubt about it, but they weren't prepared for someone like him. "Fun," Jake repeated, his voice low and steady. "You call making an 8-year-old cry fun?" The man shifted uncomfortably, his bravado slipping further. One of his buddies muttered, "Come on, man, let's just go." But the leader hesitated, unwilling to back down completely. Jake's focus never wavered, and after a long, tense moment, the men finally retreated to their truck. As they drove off, Jake knelt beside Lily, who was still clutching his hand tightly. Her tears had stopped, but her small frame trembled. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" he asked gently. She nodded, but her voice wavered when she spoke. "They ruined everything, Daddy, all my hard work." Jake's heart ached as he looked at the mess. The stand she had spent hours decorating, the money she had earned with so much pride, all of it was gone or destroyed. He could see how much it hurt her, and it ignited something deep within him, a quiet fury that simmered just beneath the surface. "We'll fix it," he promised, his voice soft but firm. "No one gets to treat you like that, not while I'm here." He scooped up the spilled coins and handed them back to her one by one. Each small, shiny piece seemed to restore a bit of her confidence. As they worked together to clean up the mess, Jake's mind raced. He had seen people like those men before, bullies who preyed on the vulnerable because they thought no one would stop them. But this was his family, his daughter, and he wasn't about to let it go. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake sat on the porch with a cup of coffee in hand, his thoughts heavy. He replayed the scene over and over, analyzing every detail. It wasn't just about the lemonade stand. It was about teaching Lily a lesson she could carry with her for the rest of her life. Lily joined him, carrying a blanket she wrapped around herself. She climbed onto his lap like she used to when she was smaller, resting her head against his chest. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Yeah, sweetheart. Why did they do that? I didn't do anything to them." Jake sighed, stroking her hair. "Some people hurt others because they think it makes them stronger. They live for people they think can't fight back. But you know what?" She tilted her head to look up at him. "What?" "They're wrong," he said, his voice steady. "Strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting what matters. And you're one of the strongest people I know." Lily frowned. "I don't feel strong." Jake smiled, kissing her forehead. "Strength isn't just about muscles or being tough. It's about your heart, how kind you are, and how brave you were today. You stood up to them, even when you were scared. That's real strength." Lily seemed to consider this, her small hands playing with the edge of the blanket. "Will they come back?" Jake's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "If they do, they'll have to deal with me first. And trust me, sweetheart, they don't want that." The next day, Jake took Lily to the store, where they picked out supplies to rebuild her lemonade stand. He let her choose bright paints and decorations, encouraging her to make it even better than before. As they worked together in the garage, laughter filled the space, pushing away the shadows of the previous day. But Jake's focus didn't waver. He wasn't just rebuilding a stand, he was preparing for something more. His instincts told him that those men weren't the kind to let things go easily. He needed to be ready, not just for Lily's sake, but for the entire neighborhood. Over the following days, Jake kept a close eye on the street. He noticed things he hadn't before: unfamiliar vehicles passing through, people lingering a little too long at the corner. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but his gut told him something wasn't right. One evening, while Lily was fast asleep and the house was quiet, Jake sat at the dining table with a map of the area spread out before him. He marked the spots where he'd seen the truck and noted times and patterns. His military training had taught him to spot inconsistencies, and this situation was no different. The more he studied, the clearer it became. These men weren't just random troublemakers. They were organized, and they had a reason for being in the area. The realization hit him hard. This wasn't just about the lemonade stand. The thought made his resolve even stronger. He had spent years protecting his country, but now his mission was closer to home. He wouldn't let anyone threaten his family or his community. As Jake sat in the quiet of the house, his mind sharp and focused, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the silence. His eyes darted to the window, and his muscles tensed. The truck was back. It idled at the end of the street, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Jake's hand instinctively reached for his phone. He wasn't going to confront them recklessly. He had a daughter to protect, and he knew better than to act impulsively. But as he watched, the truck didn't move. It just sat there, the engine humming like a predator lying in wait. Jake's mind raced. What were they planning? Were they watching him, testing him? The quiet neighborhood suddenly felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. And Jake, with every nerve on edge, knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Jake didn't take his eyes off the truck as it sat at the corner of the street. Its presence alone was enough to set his instincts on edge. The hum of the engine was steady, unbroken, like the calm before a storm. He quickly checked on Lily, who was still asleep in her room, clutching the stuffed bear he had brought back from one of his deployments. Her face was peaceful, untouched by the fears that now gripped him. He returned to the window, his sharp gaze fixed on the truck. Whoever was inside wasn't just loitering, they were sending a message. Jake's grip on his phone tightened. He debated calling the police, but without any overt threat, he doubted they would act. Still, he saved the number for the local precinct, ready to dial if the situation escalated. After what felt like an eternity, the truck finally rolled forward. It moved slowly, deliberately, like a shadow creeping across the street. Jake stayed in the dark, watching as it passed his house. Through the tinted windows, he could barely make out the silhouettes of the men inside. Their heads turned toward his home, lingering for a moment before the truck disappeared down the road. The moment it was gone, Jake stepped outside. The crisp night air hit his face as he scanned the street. It was quiet again, but the uneasy feeling in his gut remained. He knew he couldn't ignore this. The next day, Jake reached out to a trusted friend from his Navy SEAL days, a man named Connor who had settled into civilian life as a private investigator. Connor was sharp, resourceful, and, most importantly, someone Jake could count on. Over coffee at a quiet diner, Jake laid out everything that had happened, from the incident at Lily's Lemonade stand to the truck's unsettling presence. Connor listened carefully, his brow furrowed. Sounds like these guys are more than just random punks. You're right to trust your instincts. I'll dig around, see what I can find. Jake nodded, grateful. Thanks, man. I just want to make sure my family's safe. Connor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We'll figure this out, and if they come back, they'll regret it. Back at home, Jake kept a low profile, but he didn't let his guard down. He spent his free time reinforcing the house, checking locks and security cameras, and teaching Lily small, practical lessons about staying safe. He made it a game, masking his worry with playful scenarios to keep her engaged. Okay, Lily, he said one afternoon, kneeling beside her in the backyard. If you ever feel scared or think someone's following you, what do you do? She tilted her head, thinking. I run to a safe place and tell a grown-up I trust. Jake smiled, ruffling her hair. Exactly. And remember, you're never alone. I'll always be here to protect you. Lily nodded, her confidence growing. She didn't fully understand why her dad was so serious lately, but she trusted him completely. Meanwhile, Connor's investigation began to yield results. He called Jake late one evening with an update. You were right, Connor said, his tone grim. The men you described are part of a small crew that's been causing trouble in the area. Petty theft, vandalism, intimidation. Nothing big enough to get serious heat from law enforcement, but enough to make people nervous. Why here? Jake asked, his mind racing. Not sure yet, Connor admitted, but they've been targeting quiet neighborhoods like yours. Easy to scare people into submission without drawing attention. My guess, they're testing the waters for something bigger. Jake's jaw tightened. They picked the wrong place. Connor chuckled softly. That's what I thought you'd say. I'll keep digging. Let me know if anything else happens. Over the next few days, Jake noticed subtle changes around the neighborhood. Some of his neighbors seemed unusually on edge, locking their doors earlier than usual and avoiding eye contact when they passed by. A few mentioned hearing strange noises at night or spotting unfamiliar cars parked near their homes. Jake made a point to talk to as many of them as he could, offering reassurances without revealing too much. He didn't want to alarm them, but he also couldn't ignore the signs. The men in the truck weren't just a threat to his family, they were a threat to everyone. One evening, while Lily was at a friend's house for a playdate, Jake decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, the faint glow of porch lights illuminating the rows of houses. He carried himself casually, but his eyes were alert, scanning every shadow and corner. As he turned a corner, he spotted something unusual. A small group of men standing near a construction site at the edge of the neighborhood. They were talking in hushed tones, their body language tense. Jake recognized one of them immediately, the man in the leather jacket who had trashed Lily's lemonade stand. He stopped in his tracks, keeping a safe distance as he observed. The men seemed to be arguing, their voices rising just enough for snippets of their conversation to reach Jake. Taking too long? Not worth the risk. He's watching us. Jake's pulse quickened. Were they talking about him? He strained to hear more, but the men suddenly broke apart, each heading in a different direction. Jake didn't follow. He knew better than to engage without a plan. Instead, he returned home, his mind racing with possibilities. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture was far from complete. One thing was clear. This wasn't random. The men had a purpose, and Jake was determined to find out what it was before it was too late. As he sat at the kitchen table that night, reviewing everything he knew, a knock at the door startled him. Jake moved cautiously, peering through the peephole. It was Connor, his expression serious. "We need to talk," Connor said when Jake opened the door. "I found something, and you're not going to like it." Jake let him in, bracing himself for whatever was coming. "They're planning something bigger than we thought," Connor said, lowering his voice. "And they're not done with you yet." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air as Jake realized that the battle was just beginning.